254,000 on non-farm payrolls. Should we be expecting to see a figure like that next month?
Well, before I get to the job numbers, let me just stress that our hearts and our actions here at the White House are also with those whose lives and whose communities were devastated by Hurricane Helene. The president and the vice president are going to continue to deploy all the necessary resources to help those affected by this terrible event. Turning to the great jobs report, look, any month can bip or bop one way or the other. The thing we like to do to make sure that we smooth out these ups and downs is to take a 3-month average of the underlying pace of job growth. If you do that, you get payrolls at 186,000 per month for the past 3 months. That is a healthy rate of job growth. It is certainly strong enough to push the unemployment rate down. It's close to anybody's kind of upper bound of what you might think of as a break-even rate, the rate of payroll jobs you need to keep the unemployment rate where it is, and very much a full employment kind of condition in the job market.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you're absolutely right to note the humanitarian, potentially economic disaster this country has experienced in the Southeast thanks to Hurricane Helene. Before we continue our focus on the labor market, do you have an expectation of what the economic toll ultimately of the storm will be when all is tallied? Well,
first of all, thanks for acknowledging the importance of that on a day when we're touting strong economic data. You know, I could think about the economic toll, and there's always a difference, by the way, in the national accounts between net and gross activity. So sometimes you'll see economic activity bounce back strongly because of rebuilding efforts. But I really want to focus on the humanitarian challenges that have been so deep. And, you know, I want to make sure that everyone is aware of the extent to which this White House is laser focused on making sure those folks have all the resources they need. We're not done with this when it fades from the front pages by a long shot. We're going to keep, as I said, deploying necessary resources until folks there are well back on their feet.
Well, of course, we saw the president surveying the damage in a number of affected states over the last few days. But earlier today, sir, we saw the president in the briefing room. Something we haven't seen to this point in his presidency, where he had to field a question about an allegation from Senator Marco Rubio about today's job numbers being fake. This was his response, and then I'll have you respond as well.
If you notice, anything the MAGA Republicans don't like, they call fake. Anything. The job numbers are what the job numbers are. They're real. They're sincere. They're what we are. And by the way, just look at how the EU talks about us, how they like to have an economy like ours. Just talk about the rest of the world looks at us and what we're doing. So well, I don't want to get going.
Mr. Chairman, how would you explain what's happening in the data to those that question its validity?
Well, first of all, let me say that I saw the same clip. I happened to be watching that streaming as the president made those comments, and I quickly shot him off an email saying I thought he fielded that question perfectly. I thought he was spot on. You never hear those folks complain when there's a downside surprise, only when there's an upside surprise, and that shows you how disingenuous they're being. Obviously, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has impeccable integrity when it comes to these numbers, and to try to politicize them with such an obvious false message is, pretty reprehensible. What was your question?
Well, just how we should be thinking about the kind of vacillations we are seeing in the labor market, and how we saw upward revisions this time. We saw downward revisions previously, an 800,000 plus downward revision to the original BLS estimates when looking back over the period.
Yeah, I don't remember any of those folks calling that fake news. Yeah, they didn't.
All right,
so again, it's ridiculous. So, but your question is a much better one, which is how should we think about the ups and downs? Well, one of the things you do is you smooth things out by taking longer-term averages, as I did earlier in our conversation. And then, of course, you recognize that as new data comes in, you're going to get revisions. And that revision doesn't mean there was anything untoward. It just means that when you get new information, you incorporate it and you use it. By the way, we had very strong GDP revisions, and many people expected that was going to go the other way. One of the things I noted there, and it does connect to the jobs report, is that real disposable income per capita, you take out the transfers so you can have a smooth path there again, that's up $4,000 real since this president took office. We learned this morning that wages grew 4% nominal over the past year. Last seen CPI was 2.5%. That was August. In September, expectation is for a CPI around that number. I saw 2.3 this morning. That means something like 1.5, 1.7 in terms of real wage gains over the past year. That's what's feeding into those strong disposable income numbers. So real buying power pushing ahead for American workers, families, and consumers.
Well, and of course, consumers have needed that extra buying power as they've been dealing with higher inflation. We know that that has been coming down, and yet there were a number of factors we were looking at this week about that could potentially be inflationary. A super resilient labor market could be one of those. We have higher oil prices off of what's happening in the Middle East. We thought we may get higher goods prices after the dock worker strike. That seems to be resolved for now. But when you look at these things in aggregate, Mr. Chairman, are you worried that inflationary pressures could reignite?
I think when it comes to inflation, the trend is our friend. You know, the PCE, I believe, last seen was 2.2% year over year. And of course, that's the gauge that the Fed watches most closely. The national gas price this morning was $3.18 a gallon. That's 60 cents below where it was a year ago. But of course, you're right to bring in the pressures on the oil price, and that's very much a function of geopolitical pressures that we're watching very closely. Look, I think the supply chain point you made is really important, so let's not blow by that. One of the main reasons inflation has come down as far as it has, one of the main reasons why we have a round trip on year-over-year inflation, or almost a round trip back to target, is because of the unsnarling of supply chains. There was a risk that the labor action could have exacerbated that. Both sides negotiated. We were certainly trying to be helpful in that regard. Business came out ahead. Workers came out ahead. That's collective bargaining in action, and we thought it was a great result.